This was how I found out at my father's wake. My husband Stephen and my boss Vanessa disappeared into the wine cellar. I caught them together in the wine cellar at my dad's wake. Clothes shifted, lipstick smudged. Tell me, have you ever felt like the ground just disappeared beneath your feet? Like the world you thought you knew was nothing but a stage set, and someone just yelled, "Cut!" It was March 2025, Charleston, South Carolina. The air hung thick with the scent of magnolias and something else. Something heavy, like unspoken grief. My father's wake. The house, usually filled with his booming laughter, was hushed, respectful, somber. Relatives I hadn't seen in years murmured condolences, their eyes filled with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. My mother, bless her heart, was holding it together, a fragile porcelain doll on the verge of shattering. I was numb, just going through the motions. My husband Stephen was there, of course, supportive, attentive, or so I thought. He kept offering me refills of wine, patting my shoulder with that familiar, comforting gesture. My boss, Vanessa, was also there, head of acquisitions at the publishing house where I worked. She'd always been intense, driven, but I considered her a friend, a mentor even. They were talking, Stephen and Vanessa, near the buffet table, their heads close together. I didn't think much of it at the time. Just work talk, probably. My dad's memoir was about to hit the market, a hot commodity. Vanessa, as head of acquisitions, was the one who had championed it. What would you have thought? But then, later, after most of the guests had left, I noticed they were gone, missing. I couldn't find Stephen anywhere. I checked the patio, the living room, even the upstairs bedrooms. My mother was dozing in a chair, her face pale and drawn. The house felt cavernous, empty. That's when I saw it. The door to the wine cellar, slightly ajar. My father's pride and joy. He'd spent years building that cellar, stocking it with rare vintages. He loved to share a bottle with friends, to tell stories about each wine's history. He would have been devastated. A faint murmur of voices drifted from the cellar. It sounded like Stephen and Vanessa. What were they doing down there? I told myself they were probably just talking, maybe sharing a quiet moment of reflection. But a cold knot of unease tightened in my stomach. Something felt terribly wrong. I walked to the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. The voices grew louder, more distinct. I could hear Vanessa's husky laugh, Stephen's low rumble of a reply. What were they laughing about at my father's wake? I pushed the door open, and the scene that greeted me is burned into my memory. Vanessa and Stephen were standing near a rack of wine bottles, their faces flushed, their clothes slightly disheveled. Vanessa's lipstick was smudged. Stephen's tie was undone. They jumped apart when they saw me, their eyes wide with shock and guilt. The air crackled with unspoken tension. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. My head started to spin. "What's going on here?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely a whisper. Stephen stammered, "Nothing, honey. We were just talking." Vanessa's expression hardened. "We were discussing the contract for your father's book," she said, her voice tight. Stephen was just offering his, insights. Insights? In the wine cellar? With her lipstick smeared? Do you believe them? I didn't. I didn't believe a single word. I backed away from them, my heart pounding in my chest. I needed to get out of there, to breathe, to think. I stumbled back upstairs, tears welling up in my eyes. How could they? How could Stephen betray me like this? And Vanessa? My boss? My friend? It felt like a double blow, a gut punch from two people I had trusted implicitly. I spent the rest of the night in a daze, wandering through the house like a ghost. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, their guilty expressions. My mother was still asleep, exhausted from the previous day's events. Stephen was nowhere to be seen. I went downstairs to the kitchen, hoping to find some coffee. As I was rummaging through the cabinets, I found a folder tucked away in a drawer, It was labeled contracts. Curious, I opened it. Inside, I found a document that made my blood run cold. It was a contract for my father's memoir, assigning all rights to Vanessa. But something was off. The signature, it looked like my father's, but it was wrong. F, shakier, less confident. And the date, it was dated 2 weeks before my father's death. He was too weak to even hold a pen. I knew, with the certainty that settled deep in my bones, that the signature was a forgery. Vanessa had somehow managed to get her hands on my father's book, and she cheated him out of his legacy. And Stephen, he was in on it. He had to be. I sank into a chair, the contract trembling in my hands. The betrayal was even deeper than I had imagined. It wasn't just about an affair. It was about greed, about ambition, about exploiting my father's memory for personal gain. What would you do? Could you keep calm? I knew I couldn't let them get away with it. I had to do something. But what? I was just a senior editor, not a lawyer or a detective. How could I possibly fight against Vanessa, a powerful woman with connections and resources? That afternoon, after the funeral, I decided to visit my father's lawyer, Mr. Henderson. He'd handled my father's affairs for years, and I trusted him implicitly. I needed his advice. Mr. Henderson was a kind, elderly man with a gentle demeanor. He listened patiently as I told him about the contract, about my suspicions, about everything that had happened. He examined the document carefully, his brow furrowed in concentration. "This is troubling," he said. "The signature does appear to be questionable. We would need to get it examined by a handwriting expert." "But can we fight it?" I asked, my voice filled with desperation. "Can we stop Vanessa from publishing my father's book?" Mr. Henderson nodded slowly. "We can certainly try. We can file a legal challenge, argue that the contract is invalid due to the questionable signature. But it will be a long and difficult battle. Vanessa is a powerful woman, and she will not give up easily." He paused, then looked at me intently. "Are you prepared for that? Are you prepared to fight for your father's legacy?" I took a deep breath and met his gaze. "Yes," I said firmly, "I am." Leaving Mr. Henderson's office, I felt a surge of determination. It was going to be a tough fight, but I was ready. I had to protect my father's memory, to expose Vanessa and Stephen for what they were. As I was driving home, I noticed a car following me. A black sedan with tinted windows. It stayed behind me for several blocks, then suddenly sped up and pulled alongside me. The driver rolled down the window, revealing a face I didn't recognize. He was a burly man with a menacing expression. "You need to back off," he said, his voice gruff. "Just let it go. It's not worth it." I stared at him, my heart pounding in my chest. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You know what I'm talking about," he said, his eyes narrowed. "Just drop it, or you'll regret it." He sped off, leaving me shaken and terrified. Was Vanessa behind this? Was she trying to intimidate me, to scare me into giving up? Could you live with that threat? I drove straight to the police station and reported the incident. The officer on duty took my statement, but he didn't seem to take it very seriously. "We'll look into it," he said, "but there's not much we can do without more information." I left the police station feeling frustrated and vulnerable. I was on my own. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak and groan of the house sent shivers down my spine. I kept imagining the man in the black sedan, lurking outside my window. I decided to do some investigating of my own. I started by going through my father's papers, searching for any clues that might shed light on the contract. I found a box hidden in the back of his closet. Inside, there were old letters, photographs, and other mementos. As I was going through the box, I found a small sealed envelope. It was addressed to me, in my father's handwriting. I opened the envelope, my hands trembling. Inside, there was a letter. It was dated a few weeks before his death. "My dearest," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then I am no longer with you. I have something important to tell you. Vanessa made me an offer concerning my book. She offered me a very large sum of money in exchange for full rights. I was tempted, but ultimately I refused. I wanted you to handle the publishing of my story, because I know how much you believe in me. I suspect she won't take no for an answer. Be careful, my darling. Protect my legacy. The letter was like a punch to the gut. My father had known. He had suspected Vanessa's intentions, and he had trusted me to protect his work. Now I knew what I had to do. I had to fight, not just for myself, but for my father. I walked into her office, my heart pounding in my chest, and slammed the letter down on her desk. "What is this?" she asked, her voice sharp. "This is proof," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "Proof that you tried to cheat my father, proof that you forged his signature, proof that you're a liar and a thief." Vanessa's face turned pale. She tried to deny it, to bluster and deflect, but I wouldn't let her. I confronted her with the facts, with the evidence, with my father's letter. She admitted everything. She confessed to forging the signature, to trying to steal my father's book. She said she'd been desperate, that she needed a big hit to save her career. I was disgusted. How could she be so selfish, so ruthless? "And Stephen?" I asked, my voice cold. "Was he in on it too?" Vanessa hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yes," she said. "He helped me. He needed the money." The betrayal cut even deeper. Stephen, the man I had loved, the man I had trusted, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. All for money. I walked out of Vanessa's office, leaving her sobbing at her desk. I knew that she would face consequences for her actions, both legal and professional, but that wasn't enough. I needed to confront Stephen, to hear him admit what he had done. I went home and waited for him. When he tried to deny everything, but I wouldn't let him. I confronted him with Vanessa's confession, with my father's letter, with the forged contract. He said he was sorry, that he didn't mean to hurt me, that he just wanted to provide for our future. I didn't say anything. I just looked at him, my heart filled with a mixture of anger, sadness, and disappointment. "Get out," I said. "Get out of my house and out of my life." He left without a word. I never saw him again. I had to deal with the legal fallout from Vanessa's actions, with the pain of Stephen's betrayal, with the grief of losing my father. But I persevered. I hired a good lawyer, and we successfully challenged the contract. My father's book was eventually published, with me as the editor. It was a critical and commercial success. I had honored my father's legacy, and I had survived. It's been a year since then. I've started to heal, to rebuild my life. I've learned a lot about myself, about the importance of trust, about the resilience of the human spirit. What do you think? Could you recover? I still miss my father every day, and I'll never forget the pain of Stephen's betrayal. But I refuse to let it define me. I refuse to let it steal my joy. I've learned that life is full of unexpected twists and turns, of betrayals and heartbreaks, but it's also full of love, of hope, of possibilities. And I'm determined to embrace those possibilities, to live my life to the fullest, to honor my father's memory, and to never, ever let anyone take advantage of me again. I found love again in the most unexpected place, a writing workshop I joined to cope with the pain. He's kind, honest, and respects me for who I am. He reminds me that even after the darkest storms, the sun will always rise again. My father's book became a bestseller, fulfilling his dream and solidifying his legacy. The success gave me the confidence to start my own publishing company, dedicated to promoting unheard voices and authentic stories. A way to give back to the world what was almost taken from me. Looking back, I realized that what happened at my father's wake wasn't just a tragedy. It was a catalyst. It forced me to confront my vulnerabilities, to discover my strength, and to redefine my purpose. So what would you have done? Would you have sought revenge? Would you have forgiven them? I chose to honor my father's memory and build a life filled with purpose and love. And that, I believe, is the best revenge of all. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like, subscribe to my channel for more true life accounts, and tell me in the comments, what would you choose if you were me? What's your take on forgiveness versus justice? Write what you would choose. The black sedan incident. That haunted me for weeks. I started taking different routes to work, always checking my rearview mirror. I even considered moving, but the thought of leaving my father's house felt like another betrayal. It was the only place I felt truly connected to him. I remember one evening, I was sitting on the porch, watching the sunset behind the neighbor's house. The sky was ablaze with color, oranges and reds and purples, like a masterpiece painted across the canvas of the heavens. It was the kind of sunset my father would have loved. I could almost hear his voice, telling me stories about the constellations, about the myths and legends that were woven into the fabric of the night sky. But then, a car pulled up to the curb. It wasn't the black sedan. It was my mother. Her face was etched with worry, her eyes red-rimmed. She got out of the car and walked towards me, her steps hesitant. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I led her inside, and we sat down in the living room. The silence hung heavy in the air. "I knew," she said, her voice trembling. "I knew about Vanessa and Stephen." The words hit me like a physical blow. "You knew?" I asked, my voice filled with disbelief. "How long have you known?" She looked down at her hands, her fingers twisting and turning. "For a while," she said. "I saw them together at a conference a few months ago. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to hurt you." I felt a wave of anger wash over me. "How could you keep something like that from me?" I asked, my voice rising. "How could you let me go on thinking that everything was okay?" "I thought I was protecting you," she said, her voice pleading. "I thought it was better if you didn't know." "Better for who?" I asked. "Better for you, or better for Stephen?" She didn't answer. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. "Did you know about the contract?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I suspected," she said. "I saw Vanessa talking to your father, trying to convince him to sign something. I didn't know what it was, but I didn't trust her." "And you didn't tell me?" I asked, my voice filled with pain. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I was afraid," she said. "I was afraid of what would happen. I was afraid of losing you." I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the darkening sky. The beautiful sunset was gone now, replaced by a cold, indifferent darkness. What would you do in my place? Could you forgive your mother for keeping such a devastating secret? I turned back to her, my face etched with a mixture of anger and sadness. "I don't understand," I said. "I don't understand how you could put Stephen's needs ahead of mine, how you could protect him, even after what he did." She started to cry, her body shaking with sobs. "I didn't," she said. "I didn't protect him. I just wanted you to be happy. I thought if you didn't know, you wouldn't get hurt." "But I did get hurt," I said, my voice breaking. "And you made it worse. You made me feel like I couldn't trust anyone, not even my own mother." I left her there, sobbing in the living room. I needed to get away, to clear my head. I drove to the beach, to the place where my father used to take me when I was a child. The waves crashed against the shore, their roar a constant, soothing presence. I sat on the sand, watching the moon rise over the horizon. The cool night air calmed me. I thought about my father, about his love for the sea, about the lessons he had taught me. He always said that the ocean was a reminder that life is always changing, always moving forward, and that even when things seem dark and hopeless, there is always light on the horizon. As I sat there, listening to the waves, I realized that I couldn't stay stuck in the past. I couldn't let Stephen and Vanessa's betrayal define me. I had to move forward, to rebuild my life, to honor my father's memory. I decided to take a trip. I needed to get away from Charleston, to escape the memories, to find some peace. I booked a flight to Italy, a place my father had always dreamed of visiting. I spent 2 weeks exploring the country, visiting ancient ruins, eating delicious food, and soaking up the culture. I walked through the cobblestone streets of Rome, marveling at the Colosseum and the Trevi Fountain. I explored the canals of Venice, riding in a gondola and listening to the serenading gondoliers. I hiked through the rolling hills of Tuscany, surrounded by vineyards and olive groves. I met new people, listened to their stories, and learned about their lives. And I realized that there was a whole world out there, waiting to be explored. When I returned to Charleston, I felt like a different person. I was stronger, more confident, more resilient. I was ready to face whatever life threw my way. I started working on my father's book, pouring my heart and soul into the project. I wanted to make him proud. I spent hours poring over his manuscript, editing and refining his words. I wanted to capture his voice, his spirit, his essence, and I did. The book was a masterpiece. It was a story of love, loss, and redemption. It was a story that needed to be told. The day the book was published was one of the proudest days of my life. I held a copy in my hands, feeling the weight of it, the significance of it. My father's dream had. I held a small launch party at a local bookstore, inviting friends, family, and colleagues. Even my mother came, her eyes filled with tears of pride. As I stood there, surrounded by people who loved and supported me, I realized that I had come a long way. I had faced betrayal, heartbreak, and loss, but I had survived, and I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. I had learned that life is a journey, not a destination, and that even when the road is rough, there is always hope. I found a letter from Stephen hidden in an old box. It was addressed to Vanessa. The letter was filled with declarations of love, how much he adored her smile, and how she lit his world up. He mentioned how unhappy he was with me, how he felt trapped, and how she made him feel alive again. It also detailed the plan of the contract and how they were going to split the earnings. It was sickening. A wave of nausea washed over me. It was like a scene from a movie, but it was real. What would you do? I felt so stupid. I wanted to scream, to break things, to burn the letter into ashes. It was hard to believe that I had been so blind. But anger wouldn't help anything. I needed to think strategically. I found the man who had threatened me. He was a low-level thug, hired by Vanessa. I offered him more money to testify against her,